Hello there! This in-depth review is sponsored by Skillshare. It's a great learning community with over 25,000 different classes, and if you want a 2-month free trial, check out the link in the description. When it comes to semi-modular mono synths, there isn't a shortage. If you want one, there is plenty to choose from. And today I'm gonna review another one. This here is the new Stylophone GEN R8, and don't let the name fool you. It's a mono synth with semi-modular capabilities that sound pretty impressive actually. This is actually the first stylophone that I feel is useful for a more wide range of music producers. The previous version, the Gen X1, I liked it, but I just couldn't use it for anything because it lacked MIDI and CV, so there was no way to interconnect it with my other stuff in the studio, but it sounded good anyway, so. But the real question is, of course, if the new Stylophone GEN R8 has something unique to offer, because with so many analog monosynths out there and semi-modular analog monosynths, you know, why should you pick the Stylophone? So that's what we're gonna explore today. So let's start with the oscillator section, because it's actually more interesting than you might first think. There's two oscillators here. You have a sawtooth and you have a square wave. But you also have sub-oscillators. So you have the normal sound and 1 octave down and 2 octave down. You can also use both sub-oscillators at one time. And if we use the second oscillator, you can get a really big sound. So that's a total of 6 oscillators sounding at once. For the square wave, and you can of course also turn off the oscillator, but for the square wave we have the normal sound, sub-oscillator, and 2 octaves down. I think that the tracking of the oscillator is pretty nice, so we can go -2 here. It's a pretty decent tracking, and it's also very easy to calibrate. You just hold these two buttons together and it calibrates. We also have master tuning and oscillator 2 detuning, which is nice because we have a sync mode, so you can sync the two oscillators together. And here's a patch example where I'm patching the envelope output into the CV of oscillator 2, controlling the sync effect. And we also have ring mod on and off, and you can of course have both on at the same time. In terms of CV, we have the CV in, which affects both oscillators. We have the CV for the individual oscillators. We have the pulse width for oscillator 1. We also have a square output that you can use from oscillator number 2, for example, for frequency modulating stuff. So you could take a patch cable like this, CV out, into oscillator number 1 here. You can use that square output to get some really metallic tones. So here we're modulating the filter using the LFO. Let's take the LFO output, controlling the CV of oscillator 2, then taking the square output into the filter. let's talk a little bit about the keyboard. Let's just say that it's an acquired taste. I don't think it's for everyone. You can do some cool stuff. For example, we have a glide and we have a mod button over here, or controller over here. So for example, if I set the speed here, something like this, and hold the glide, I can control the speed of the glide. But what's really cool actually is that you can use this keyboard with the CV out and gate out as long as the sequencer isn't playing to control something else, say a Mother 32. We'll do that later in the video. We also have the mod depth over here that you control with this button here. And now I've set the LFO to control oscillator number 2 here, the pitch of oscillator number 2. And if I hold down mod, it just creates extra modulation. You also use the keyboard to record into the sequencer, and you can also change the key of the sequence playing using the keyboard, and also use the glide and the mod features while the sequencer is running. Over here you have speed for the sequencer, and here you can switch the sequence, and I would have preferred it if there was a noticeable click when you switch from one sequence to another. And you can also hear something which I don't like. You hear the scraping noise? The knobs of this unit is not very nice actually, and the caps themselves are okay, but they just scrape against the surface in the same way like the Craft Synth 2 and Sculpt did, which is, it's not a nice feeling. And the knobs themselves wobble quite a bit too, so that's something to keep in mind if it's very important to you. So you have a 16-step sequencer, 8 banks, and you can of course send the sequence out via CV out and gate out. So to record, we just select number 2 here, press record. We can add rests and ties. You can also switch between sequences while playing. And you can transpose them. So all in all, it's a pretty rudimentary sequencer. You can't set swing or time divisions, for example. So basically what you see is what you get. You have the mod and the glide as well available while you're playing a sequence. And I thought I'd quickly touch on MIDI implementation. None of the knobs send MIDI CC. So you can send MIDI via the keyboard, but not via the knobs. However, the knobs do respond to CC messages. There are a couple that are available, and I'll post them here right now. Next up, let's talk about the LFO. So there's just one LFO, you have speed and depth, and you have a lot of different waveforms. So for example, you have a waveform like this that you heard earlier. Which is sort of like a staircase, and you also have a sample and hold random. And you have 3 destinations here, as well as a one-shot mode. So you can select all of them. And we can turn on one shot, meaning that the LFO does like one cycle per note you're playing. We also have two outputs for the LFO, so you could, for example, assign it to something internally, like say the resonance. We also have inputs, reset, we have speed control and depth control. Next up we have the filter, and it actually has 4 modes. So we have a high pass, we have a low pass. If we select both of them, we have a band pass, and if we deselect them, we get sort of a notch filter. I think it sounds pretty cool, and we have a more normal low pass. Pretty nice. You don't want to go too hot on the resonance. It does get kind of harsh for your ears. And we have a high pass. And together we got the band pass. We also have control of the filter using the envelope. Which can be useful, for example, for drum sounds or, say, bass sounds. And here's an example of the filter self-oscillating. But let's say you don't want to use the internal envelope, well then you have cutoff and resonance inputs over here, so you can use an external source to control the filter as well. Talking about the envelope, we have gate input for triggering the envelope, and we have envelope output, so you could use it to control something else or modulate something internally. And we have attack, we have decay, we have sustain and release. It's pretty standard stuff, so instead let's talk about the delay. So you can set the delay level here, repeats and time. For the delay, you can control the time using, say, an LFO. Last, in terms of sound shaping, we have the drive. Here I'm using the 2 oscillators plus the 4 sub-oscillators. So the drive really beefs up the sound. And then of course we have the mixer section. There is no independent volume for the 2 oscillators. That's something I wish that they've added. It's always nice to be able to control the relative levels. But there's a main volume output. You also have a phones output, a dedicated headphones output. You also have an aux input. So you can take a signal and process it through the filter, the drive, and the delay. And in terms of I/O on the back, we have a main output, we have the power, and we have MIDI in and out, and you get these breakout cables for the MIDI. I of course would have preferred full-sized MIDI. Given the size of the unit, that would have been much better. And then on the side here you have a couple of switches that you can use, for example, for sequencer gate time if you want it to be short or long, sequencer transpose, MIDI local on and off, and so on. You can of course also set the MIDI channel that it responds to. So before I show you how to connect this synth with the Mother 32 and give you the pros and cons and final thoughts, here's a word from my sponsor. So Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 different classes. I promoted stuff like their coffee brewing classes before, but today I want to promote this class here by Young Guru, an excellent mix engineer and producer. He has a couple of really well produced courses that go over stuff like mixing and recording from a home studio environment without needing a ton of equipment, so I definitely recommend them. You should check them out. An annual subscription is less than $10 a month, and it gets you unlimited access to all of Skillshare's classes, and if you use my link in the description you get a 2-month free trial. So go and check out Skillshare, it's a cool service, and you can find pretty much whatever course you want on there, so check it out. The big point of a semi-modular is, for example, the ability to connect it to something else. So let's connect it to the Mother 32. We take the CV out into the 1 volt per octave here. We take the gate output here and connect it to the gate input here. And now if I connect the VCA out into the aux input, and let me just turn off the oscillators. And yeah, maybe I should turn on the Mother 32 first. So that's the Mother 32 with some noise. It's set to square wave. So having the option to input something through the filter, going through the delay and the drive is really nice. You can create this kind of thick and big sound. So that's the Stylophone GEN R8 and what it sounds like and what it can do. Now I'm gonna end the video with some pros and some cons and also touch on alternatives. During my testing I found that the lack of a level control for the individual oscillators was quite the big drawback, and I feel that the sequencer is on the too rudimentary side. I would have loved swing, different time signatures and stuff like that. I also didn't like that the 8 sequencer banks didn't have set positions, so the knob you can just goes freely, and I didn't like that. And of course the knobs scraping against the surface of the synth and also being quite wobbly wasn't something I enjoyed particularly, and I think this is a really important point. That's something that a lot of manufacturers seem to not think too much about. I'm not concerned about them lasting or being of bad quality. I'm concerned about the feeling, because one reason why you get such a nice mono synth and don't go the software route is because you want that nice tactile feel, and if you start turning a knob and it just doesn't feel that good, that's a problem. Oh, and a negative is definitely using breakout cables for the MIDI and not having full-size MIDI on the unit itself. With the sort of real estate that you have, it's a big unit, you should be able to have real MIDI ports. So let's talk about the positives, and there were quite a few. I really like the kind of unique design that I had going with the oscillators, having the dual sub-oscillators for 6 total oscillators. It really sounds fat and big, so I enjoyed that quite a lot. It's not the kind of sound that you usually can get out of a mono synth like this, so that's something to keep in mind. It really feels like you're stacking up voices, and I thought that was kind of cool. I really like the drive. You can really push the sound without it sounding too distorted, so that's a big plus. Auxiliary inputs. I like them on pretty much any synth, and I definitely like it when you get to pass through the signal, through the filter, the effect section, and the drive. And yeah, so that's a home run for this synth. And ultimately it comes down to sound. Does it sound good and unique? And I think it does. Does it sound to your tastes? Well, you have to determine that for yourself. But I've found that this is the type of synth that could easily find its way into my productions, just like, say, the Minilogue, the original Minilogue, because it has this sort of yeah, it has this sort of unique tone to it. It doesn't always sound super pleasing, but when you find the sweet spots, it's really interesting and sticks out, and that's something I enjoy from, especially from a little mono synth like this. So in summary, the new Stylophone is a well-built, except for the feeling of the knobs, synth with some original sound character to it and some quirky and interesting choices in terms of design. When it comes to alternatives, I'm thinking that for semi-modular, something like the Bearing Neutron and the Moog Mother 32 are interesting choices, or maybe the O-Coast No Coast from Make Noise could be interesting to check out if you want something really original, something that goes, yeah, a totally different direction. So maybe not really alternatives in terms of sound, but just in terms of capabilities being mono and semi-modular. And if patch points isn't your thing, you should check out the Korg Monologue. It's an interesting little mono synth with a much deeper sequencer. So it's a little bit more built for stage use, I'd say, than something like the Stylophone, so that could be worth checking out as well. But if you like what you heard in this video and you want this kind of rough around the edges type sound, then the Stylophone could be for you. So thank you so much for watching this review, and I hope to see you in the next video. My name is Bo, this is Bobeats. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff if you want to, and yeah, see you later. And be sure to check out today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you want a 2-month free trial, click the link in the description.